The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, cold and silent. Amidst this darkness, a lone ship drifted, its hull scorched and broken. The Velari, a medium-sized exploration vessel, had once been a proud ship. Now it was barely holding together, its engines dead, its power flickering. Inside, the crew of 10 aliens fought to survive. Commander Kellic, a reptilian alien with dark green scales and sharp yellow eyes, stood in the control room, gripping the edge of the console. His long claws tapped against the metal as he stared at the blinking red lights. Oxygen levels were dropping. The emergency power would last only a few more hours. The ship had been ambushed by raiders, ruthless space scavengers who attacked anything they could loot. The Velari had tried to run, but their engines had taken heavy damage. Now they were stranded in a dead zone. No planets nearby, no ships in range. Kellic turned to his crew. They were a mix of different species, all exhausted and injured. "We need to send a distress signal," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Someone out there might hear us." A small four-armed technician named Orla hesitated. "Commander, we are deep in an uncharted sector. No ships travel here." "We have no choice," Kellic replied. "If we do nothing, we die." Orla sighed and pressed a few buttons. A weak signal pulsed from the ship, repeating the same message over and over. "This is the Velari. We have been attacked and require immediate assistance. Our engines are offline. Oxygen levels critical. Please, if anyone hears this, help us." They waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. Some crew members slumped in their seats, accepting their fate. Others whispered among themselves. Kellic knew what they were thinking. Who would come? No one trusted strangers in deep space. And if a ship did hear them, would they be rescuers or more raiders? Suddenly, the communications console beeped. A response. The crew jumped to attention, eyes wide. It's coming from a Terran fighter," Orla said, her voice shaking. Silence filled the room. "A human?" Kellic muttered. Every alien species had heard stories about humans. They were unpredictable, dangerous. A warrior race that had fought and won battles against enemies far stronger than them. Some called them reckless, others called them fearless. But one thing was certain: when humans entered a fight, they did not back down. "Play the message," Kellic ordered. A deep voice came through the speakers, steady and confident. "This is Captain Doran Reeve of the Terran Defense Force. I received your distress signal. I'm on my way. Hold tight." The message ended. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "Commander," Orla whispered, Should we trust him?" Kellic didn't answer immediately. He had never met a human before. He had seen recordings of their battles, heard rumors about their advanced fighters and unmatched combat skills. A single Terran pilot had once taken down an entire enemy squadron alone. But they had no choice. "We let him come," Kellic said finally. "If he is here to help, we survive. If not, we will fight with what little strength we have left." A tense silence filled the control room. Then, from the viewport, they saw something fast. A sleek fighter craft, smaller than their ship, but moving with incredible precision. It cut through space like a blade, heading straight toward them. The human had arrived. The Velari crew stood frozen as they watched the human fighter approach. The sleek black craft moved with impossible speed, cutting through the darkness like a predator. It wasn't large, not even half the size of their own ship, but there was something terrifying about the way it moved, like it owned the space around it. Inside the control room, Commander Kellic narrowed his yellow eyes. The Velari was in no condition to fight, but his instincts screamed at him to be careful. He had heard stories about human pilots. They were unpredictable, fast, and deadly. He had seen battle recordings where a single human ship outmaneuvered an entire squadron, twisting and darting through space like a ghost. A cold shiver ran through Orla, the four-armed technician. "Commander," she whispered, Are we sure this is a rescue and not a new threat? Kellic clenched his jaw. We are about to find out. The human ship slowed as it approached the docking bay. A moment later, their comm system crackled to life. Valari crew, this is Captain Doran Reeve. Preparing to board. Kellic hesitated for only a second before pressing the console. Permission granted. The airlock doors slid open with a heavy hiss. The crew held their breath as a lone figure stepped inside. Doran Reeve was tall, his body lean but strong. He wore a black flight suit with the insignia of the Terran Defense Force on his shoulder. A helmet covered his face, its visor reflecting the dim emergency lights of the ship. He took a single step forward, then reached up and pulled off his helmet. A human. His face was sharp, with piercing blue eyes that scanned the room like he was calculating everything around him. His dark brown hair was cut short, and his expression was calm, too calm. He didn't look nervous, didn't look afraid. If anything, he looked curious. The crew shifted uncomfortably. They had seen battle-hardened commanders panic in dire situations. Yet this human, standing alone on an alien ship surrounded by unfamiliar faces, looked completely in control. "Who's in charge here?" Reeve asked, his voice smooth but firm. Kellic stepped forward. "I am. Commander Kellic." Reeve gave a small nod. "All right, Commander. Let's cut to the chase. Your ship is dead in the water, you're low on oxygen, and there's a hostile sector not far from here. What's your status?" Kellic didn't like being questioned, but he pushed his pride aside. "We were ambushed by raiders. Our engines are offline. Power is running low, and we have minimal weapons." Reeve exhaled through his nose. Bad situation. He glanced around, taking in the flickering lights, the damaged consoles, the tired faces. "I don't have a lot of time. There's a raider signal nearby. If they're tracking your ship, we need to move fast." Orla gulped. "You mean the raiders could be coming back?" Reeve nodded. "That's how they operate. They disable a ship, leave it stranded, and return later to strip it for parts." A heavy silence filled the room. They had assumed the worst was over. Now, it seemed the real danger was just beginning. Kellic tightened his grip on his belt. "You're a single pilot. How do you expect to help us?" Reeve smirked. "You'd be surprised what one good pilot can do." He walked to the main console, examining the ship's systems. His fingers danced across the controls, pulling up data screens as if he had been working on alien technology his entire life. The crew watched in shock as he adjusted settings, rerouted power, and even reset a few failing circuits. "You've got just enough power left for a small burst," Reeve muttered. "Not enough for a full escape, but enough to maneuver. Your weapons are weak, but they're still functional." He glanced at Kellic. "If the raiders come back, we're going to have to fight." Orla's voice trembled. "Fight? Against raiders? We don't stand a chance." Reeve turned to her, his expression unreadable. "That depends." "Depends on what?" Kellic asked. Reeve's smirk returned. "Depends on whether you're willing to trust a human." Kellic's claws tapped against his belt. His people feared humans for their aggressive tactics, their refusal to surrender, their ability to win battles that should have been impossible. But right now, Kellic had no other choice. He let out a slow breath. "What do you need us to do?" Reeve nodded. "Get your crew ready. If the raiders return, we won't be running." "We're going to fight," Orla whispered. Reeve's blue eyes gleamed. "No." He turned toward the viewport, where the darkness of space loomed. "We're going to win." The Valari crew moved quickly, their fear replaced by urgency. The human, Captain Doran Reeve, had taken command as if he had always belonged there. It was strange. Humans were supposed to be reckless, unpredictable. But this one had a calm confidence that made even the doubtful crew members listen. Commander Kellic stood beside him at the control panel. "We don't have much time," he muttered. "How do we fight against a full raider squadron with a broken ship?" Reeves smirked as he examined the ship's limited systems. "We don't fight their way," he said. "We fight my way." He tapped a few buttons on the console, scanning what remained functional. The main engines were still offline, but there was just enough power for minor thruster control. The ship's weapons were damaged, but a few laser turrets could still fire. "It's not great," Reeve admitted, "but I've won with worse." Orla, the four-armed technician, looked at him in disbelief. "You've fought with worse than this." Reeve glanced at her. "You'd be surprised." A warning beep sounded through the control room. Orla's screen flashed red. "Commander," she gasped. "They're coming." Kellick's yellow eyes narrowed. "How many?" Orla's fingers trembled as she checked the readings. 3 fighter-class ships, 1 larger gunship. They'll be here in 5 minutes. A heavy silence fell over the crew. The Velari was in no condition for this. Their ship was slower, weaker, and barely holding together. But Reeve only nodded, as if this was exactly what he expected. "Good," he said. "That means they won't be careful." Kellick frowned. "What do you mean?" "They think we're dead already." Reeve turned to face the crew. "They're coming in relaxed. No shields up, no formation. They expect an easy kill." His smirk widened. "That's their mistake." Kellick crossed his arms. "And what's your plan, human?" Reeve stepped to the center of the room. "We're going to use the ship's thrusters to make it look like we're barely alive. When they get close, we hit them hard, fast, and unexpected." He pointed at the gunship on the radar. "That one's the problem. It's got heavier armor. We need to take out the fighters first." Kellick hesitated. "And then what?" Reeve's blue eyes gleamed. "Leave the gunship to me." Orla's jaw dropped. "You can't take on a gunship alone." Reeve simply smiled. "Watch me." The trap is set. The crew followed Reeve's plan, positioning the Velari so it looked like a dead ship, drifting slowly. Emergency lights flickered weakly. The damaged hull gave the perfect illusion of helplessness. The raiders fell for it. Through the viewport, Kellick saw the 3 enemy fighters approach at high speed. Their pilots weren't cautious. They were eager, confident. The gunship followed behind, moving slower, as if it was enjoying the hunt. "They're in range," Orla whispered. Reeve's fingers hovered over the controls. "Not yet." The fighters came closer, circling the Velari like vultures. Closer. The lead fighter turned, charging its weapons for the killing shot. Reeve's eyes sharpened. "Now." Kellick slammed his hand on the fire control. The Velari's remaining turrets roared to life, sending bursts of laser fire straight into the unsuspecting fighters. The first enemy ship exploded instantly, caught off guard. The second spiraled away, its wings shattered. The third tried to escape, but Reeve had already moved. He sprinted toward the docking bay, where his sleek fighter craft was waiting. Within seconds, he was in the cockpit. "Cover me," his voice crackled through the comms. The Velari's weapons fired again, keeping the remaining raiders distracted. Then, like a ghost, Reeve's ship shot out from the docking bay at incredible speed. The demon in the sky. The raider pilots had never seen anything move like that. Reeve's fighter twisted and spun, dodging enemy fire with impossible precision. He moved too fast, too unpredictably. The second fighter barely had time to react before Reeve's missiles locked on. One shot. The enemy ship exploded in a flash of fire. The third pilot panicked and tried to flee. Reeve didn't let him. A quick burst from his laser cannons, and the last raider fighter was gone. Kellick and the crew watched in stunned silence. The human had just taken out 2 enemy ships in seconds, but the battle wasn't over. The gunship's engines flared as it realized the trap. Its heavy cannons turned toward Reeve's fighter. Orla's voice came through the comms. "That thing is twice your size. You can't." "I know," Reeve interrupted. His voice was calm, almost amused. "But it's slow." The gunship fired. Massive blasts of plasma streaked toward Reeve. Any normal pilot would have been vaporized. Reeve wasn't a normal pilot. He rolled his fighter sideways, dodging the blasts by mere inches. Then, before the gunship could fire again, he did something insane. He flew straight toward it. Kellick's claws dug into his console. Is he trying to ram it? Orla gasped. That's suicide. But Reeve wasn't attacking head-on. At the last second, he twisted his ship into a tight spin, weaving around the gunship's hull. The raiders tried to track him, but he was too fast. Then he fired. Not at the armor. At the engines. A single missile. The explosion ripped through the gunship's core. Fire erupted from the back, and the massive vessel shuddered. The raiders had no chance to react. Within seconds, the gunship was nothing more than debris. Victory and silence. Reeve's fighter glided back toward the Velari. The control room was silent. Orla finally whispered, Is it over? Reeve's voice crackled through the comms. Yeah, it's over. The human landed his fighter back in the docking bay. As the airlock opened, Kellick and the crew stood waiting. Reeve stepped out, stretching his shoulders. That wasn't too bad. Kellick stared at him. You just destroyed a gunship alone. Reeve shrugged. Like I said, I've won with worse. The crew didn't know what to say. They had feared humans. But now, after what they had seen, one thing was certain. Doran Reeve wasn't just a pilot. He was a force of nature. And for the first time, the Velari crew felt lucky that he was on their side. The control room of the Velari was silent, except for the soft hum of the damaged ship's systems. The crew still hadn't fully processed what had just happened. A single human pilot had taken on a raider squadron and won. Commander Kellick turned to look at Doran Reeve, who stood near the viewport, casually adjusting the straps on his flight suit like nothing had happened. You destroyed a gunship, Kellick finally said. His voice was filled with disbelief. Reeve smirked. Yeah, that was fun. Orla's forehands were still shaking as she clutched her tablet. You call that fun? We could have all died. Reeve leaned against the console, crossing his arms. And yet here we are. Kellick exhaled slowly. I won't lie, human. That was impressive. Reeve gave a small nod. Glad you think so. But we're not safe yet. Orla frowned. What do you mean? Reeve pointed at the radar screen. That gunship got off a distress signal before it exploded. Kellick's claws tapped against the metal console. You're saying more raiders are coming. Reeve's expression darkened. Not just raiders. He turned to the crew. Who you think runs these raider groups? Silence. The Velari had never considered it. Raiders were disorganized, lawless scavengers. They attacked for supplies and then disappeared into deep space. Orla's voice was hesitant. They work for warlords. Reeve nodded. Exactly. And the warlord who controls this sector isn't going to be happy that we just wiped out his squadron. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Kellick's jaw tightened. How much time do we have? Reeve checked the console. Not long. A larger fleet could be here within the hour. Orla's voice trembled. But our engines are still down. We can't escape. Reeve rolled his shoulders. Then we fixed them. Fast. The race against time. Kellick ordered the engineering team to focus all efforts on restoring engine power. Orla led the repair team, moving quickly through the ship's damaged corridors. Reeve followed her, scanning the broken systems. What's the main issue? Orla huffed as she worked. The energy relays are fried. The power core is still functional, but it can't transfer energy to the engines. Reeve nodded. All right, what do we need to bypass the damage? Orla hesitated. We'd need a direct link between the power core and the thrusters, but that's impossible without. Without what? Reeve asked. Orla sighed. A high-energy capacitor strong enough to handle the power surge. Reeve smirked. Good thing I brought my ship. Orla's eyes widened. You mean, use your fighter as a power source? Reeve nodded. I have a backup energy core in my ship. It's small, but it packs enough power to jumpstart your engines. Kellick's voice crackled through the comms. Reeve, are you sure about this? Reeve grinned. I wouldn't suggest it if I wasn't. The gamble. With the crew working at full speed, Reeve's fighter was carefully connected to the Valeri's power core. Orla set up the transfer link while Kellick monitored the process. All right, Orla said, wiping sweat from her forehead. The connection is ready. Reeve stood near the console, his fingers hovering over the activation switch. Once I'd flipped this, your engine should power up. But you'll only get one chance. If this overloads the system, we're dead in the water. Kellick exhaled sharply. Do it. Reeve hit the switch. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the ship trembled as a surge of energy flowed through its systems. The emergency lights flickered, and the main engine control panel came to life. The sound of thrusters activating rumbled through the hull. Orla gasped. It worked. Kellick's voice was urgent. Then we move. Now. The chase begins. As the Valeri began to accelerate, alarms blared through the ship. Orla's heart sank as she looked at the radar screen. They're here, she whispered. Through the viewport, two massive ships appeared in the distance. Warships, larger and more powerful than the gunship Reeve had destroyed. Their hulls were marked with the insignia of the Warlord who ruled this region. A message came through the comms. Valeri vessel, this is Commander Gore of the Bloodfang fleet. Surrender immediately. Kellick's claws tightened. No response. He turned to Reeve. Can we outrun them? Reeve studied the radar. Not at full speed. But we can delay them. Orla's voice was filled with fear. How? Reeve grinned. By making them chase a ghost. The human's trick. Reeve sprinted back to his fighter. Before anyone could stop him, he launched into space. Kellick's voice came through the comms. Reeve, what are you doing? Reeve's smirk was audible. Buying you time. His fighter twisted through space, moving directly toward the warships. Commander Gore's voice came through again. A human pilot. You dare challenge us alone. Reeve's voice was calm. Yeah, I do. He fired his thrusters, speeding past the enemy fleet. The warships hesitated for only a moment, then turned to pursue him. On the Valeri, Kellick stared at the radar in disbelief. He's leading them away. Orla swallowed. But what if they catch him? Kellick's voice was grim. Then he dies buying us time. The ship's engines roared as it sped toward the edge of the sector. Reeve's voice crackled through the comms. Don't wait for me. Get out of here. Orla's hands trembled. Reeve. No arguments. Just go. The Valeri crew watched as the human pilot disappeared into the distance, chased by the Warlord's fleet. Kellick took a deep breath. He just saved us. Orla whispered, but who will save him? As the Valeri escaped into hyperspace, one thought remained in the minds of the crew. Doran Reeve was still out there, alone, against impossible odds. But if anyone could survive, it was him. Doran Reeve gripped the controls of his fighter as he weaved through the darkness of space. Behind him, the two warships of the Bloodfang fleet gave chase, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. The odds were ridiculous. A single human fighter against two heavily armed warships. But Reeve wasn't panicked. If anything, he felt alive. All right, boys, he muttered to himself. Let's see how good you really are. A deadly game of cat and mouse. The first warship fired a plasma cannon blast. Reeve rolled his fighter sideways, barely dodging the deadly beam. The second ship followed up with a spread of missiles. Reeve's hands moved fast. He twisted his ship into a sharp dive, flying dangerously close to an asteroid field up ahead. The missiles chased him, but at the last second, he cut his engines and let his ship drift. The missiles sped past him and exploded against a massive asteroid. Commander Gore's angry voice crackled through the comms. You're only delaying the inevitable, human. Reeve smirked. I'd rather delay than die, thanks. He accelerated again, using the asteroid field as cover. The warships slowed down, afraid to crash into the massive rocks, but their fighter squadrons kept coming. 8 enemy fighters locked onto Reeve's position. That's more like it, Reeve muttered. The dogfight begins. The enemy fighters surrounded him, moving in formation. But Reeve wasn't afraid. He suddenly cut his speed, making them overshoot. In that one moment of confusion, he fired. 2 ships exploded instantly. The remaining 6 pilots adjusted quickly, coming at him from different angles. Lasers filled the sky, forcing Reeve to dodge, spin, and maneuver with impossible precision. A sharp turn, a quick missile drop. Another enemy was gone. He looped upward, flying between 2 fighters just as they fired. Their shots hit each other, destroying them both. 4 left, he muttered. 1 fighter locked on from behind, its weapons charging. Reeve had a trick for that. He suddenly slammed his brakes, slowing down instantly. The enemy pilot didn't have time to react and shot past him. Reeve took the shot. Another explosion. The last 3 enemy fighters hesitated. This human wasn't just skilled. He was a nightmare. A desperate plan. Back on the warship's bridge, Commander Gore slammed his fist against the console. 1 fighter, just 1 fighter, and he's tearing us apart. Destroyed him. His officers hesitated. Commander, if we fire heavy weapons, we might hit our own men. Do it. The warships charged their plasma cannons. If they hit, Reeve would be vaporized instantly. Reeve saw the energy build up and cursed. Guess I'm out of time. He turned his ship sharply toward the nearest enemy fighter. Instead of firing, he rammed into it, clipping its wing just enough to send it spinning into another ship. 2 more gone. Only 1 fighter left. The last pilot panicked and tried to flee. Reeve locked onto him. Sorry, pal, can't let you wander, boss. 1 final shot. The last enemy exploded. Now, it was just Reeve against the warships. The final gamble. Reeve checked his systems. His ship was running out of power. He couldn't fight those warships directly. But he had one last idea. He switched to an open frequency. Hey, Commander Gore. You still there? A growling voice responded. You are finished, human. Reeve smirked. Maybe. But I bet you're too afraid to fight me yourself. There was a long pause. What? You heard me. You're sitting in that big, heavy ship while I've taken down everything you've thrown at me. You're scared. Gore growled. I fear no one. Then prove it, Reeve said. Lower your shields. Come fight me like a real warrior. Gore laughed. Do you think I am a fool? You want me to drop my defenses? Reeve shrugged. Guess I was wrong. You're scared. Gore roared in anger. I will show you fear, human. To Reeve's surprise, Gore actually did it. His warship's front shields lowered as the main cannons charged up for a direct shot. Reeve's smirk widened. Idiot. At the last second, he reversed his thrusters, dodging the attack. The warship's own plasma beam missed, and instead hit the second warship directly in the engines. A massive explosion tore through space. The second warship shuddered and went dark, its systems fried. Gore's voice was filled with rage. You tricked me. Reeve grinned. Yeah, that's kinda my thing. The escape. Reeve boosted his ship away as Gore's remaining warship fired wildly, missing every shot. His fuel was almost gone. He needed an escape route. Then, his radar flashed. A wormhole. It was unstable, but it was his only chance. Reeve turned toward it at full speed. Come on, hold together, he muttered to his ship. Behind him, Gore's warship followed, still firing. Reeve entered the wormhole's gravitational pull. The force shook his entire cockpit, alarms blaring everywhere. Then, a sudden pull, a flash of light, and Reeve was gone. Where am I? The next thing he knew, His ship was floating in total silence. His vision cleared, and he looked around. The wormhole had spit him out in a completely different sector of space. No sign of the warships. No enemies. But also, no sign of the Velari. Reeve frowned. Well, that's a problem. His comms crackled. A distorted voice came through. Unidentified vessel, state your purpose. Reeve's heart pounded. That wasn't the Velari. That was someone else. And from the look of the massive station floating nearby, he had just jumped into another dangerous situation. Doran Reeve took a deep breath, steadying himself as his fighter drifted in the unknown sector of space. His ship's fuel was nearly gone, his weapons had minimal charge, and he had just escaped a deadly battle, only to find himself face to face with something new. The massive space station in front of him was unlike anything he had ever seen. It wasn't a simple outpost or a warship. It was enormous, built from dark metal, with strange glowing symbols along its surface. Several smaller ships patrolled around it, their sleek designs showing advanced technology. And then there was the voice. Unidentified vessel, state your purpose. Reeve's fingers hovered over his controls. His instincts told him this place was dangerous, but he had no other option. If he tried to run, he would run out of power and drift into space forever. So, he took a chance. This is Doran Reeve, a pilot from Earth. My ship got caught in a wormhole, and I have no idea where I am. There was a long silence. Then, another voice, this one calmer, almost amused. A human. Here. That's rare. Reeve raised an eyebrow. Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises. The invitation. One of the smaller ships broke formation and moved toward him. The voice spoke again. Your ship is damaged. Follow the escort to Dock 7. Do not deviate from course. Reeve sighed. He didn't like following orders, but he had no choice. Fine. Lead the way. The escort ship guided him toward a docking bay, where massive doors slid open to reveal the station's interior. As he landed, his cockpit display flickered with warnings. His ship was running on its last drops of fuel. Good timing, he muttered. Reeve opened the hatch and stepped onto the landing platform, stretching his arms. He felt stiff from the long flight. Then he noticed the figures waiting for him. There were 4 of them, each wearing long dark coats with high collars. Their skin was a pale grayish blue, and their eyes glowed faintly. They weren't the same species as the Velari crew. These aliens were something else. One of them stepped forward, studying him with a cold expression. I am Commander Xel of the Syndicate, he said. You are now in our territory. Reeve crossed his arms. Syndicate, huh? Sounds friendly. Xel's lips curled into a small smirk. Not exactly. The Syndicate's offer. Reeve was taken to a large chamber where high-ranking members of the Syndicate sat in a semicircle. The room had no decorations, just cold metal walls and a giant screen displaying tactical data. An older Syndicate officer studied him carefully. We intercepted the battle between you and the Bloodfang fleet, she said. Your skill as a pilot is impressive. Reeve shrugged. I try. Xel leaned forward. And yet, despite your ability, you are alone. Your allies left without you. Reeve's jaw tightened. They didn't leave me. I told them to escape while I bought them time. The older officer exchanged a glance with Xel. Then she said, You have no ship, no backup, and no resources. But we can change that. Reeve narrowed his eyes. What are you offering? Xel clasped his hands behind his back. A place with us. The Syndicate values strength. We need pilots who can win battles, outthink enemies, and survive against impossible odds. Reeve leaned back in his chair, thinking. He didn't trust these people. They had the look of cold strategists, people who used others as tools. What's the catch? He asked. The older officer smiled. Loyalty. Reeve chuckled. Yeah, see, that's a problem. I don't do well with following orders. Zeld's smile faded. Then perhaps we should simply throw you out of an airlock. The room tensed. Reeves' grin didn't fade. That's one way to handle negotiations. The older officer raised a hand, stopping Zeld. Calm yourself, Commander. Let the human consider. She turned back to Reeve. You don't have to decide now. Stay as our guest. Eat, rest, and when you're ready, we will talk again. Reeve knew he was being played. They wanted him to think he had a choice. But for now, he needed a plan. He nodded. Fine, I'll think about it. A secret message. A few hours later, Reeve sat in a quiet chamber, eating a bland meal. The room had no windows, no visible exits except a single locked door. They're not letting me walk around, he muttered. Figures. Then, his communicator beeped. Reeve frowned. His comms should have been disabled. He tapped the screen, and a distorted voice whispered through. Reeve, can you hear me? Reeve tensed. Who is this? The voice responded urgently. I don't have time to explain. You're in danger. The Syndicate doesn't want you as a pilot. They'd want your mind. Reeve's heartbeat quickened. What does that mean? They want to study how humans fight. You're a test subject to them. Once they get what they need, they will get rid of you. Reeve clenched his jaw. Who are you? Someone who wants to help. Listen carefully. There's a maintenance shaft behind your room. In 10 minutes, I will disable the security system for 30 seconds. That's your only chance to escape. Reeve didn't hesitate. I'm in. Good. Get to Dock 12. There's a ship waiting. And Reeve. Hurry. The transmission ended. Reeve looked at the wall behind him. Now that he was paying attention, he saw it, a faint outline of a hidden maintenance panel. Well, he muttered, looks like I won't be staying for breakfast. He moved quickly, gripping the edges of the panel. And then he pulled. The panel came loose. A dark tunnel stretched ahead. Reeve took a deep breath, checking the time. 9 minutes left. Doran Reeve moved fast. The hidden maintenance tunnel behind his room was narrow and dark, filled with cables and pipes. He crawled through it, ignoring the dust and the faint hum of energy running through the station's walls. He had less than 9 minutes before the Syndicate realized he was missing. His mysterious contact had told him to head for Dock 12, where a ship was waiting. But he didn't know who was helping him, or why. All he knew was that he had to move. The alarms began. As Reeve slid through the tunnel, a loud alarm blared across the station. Security alert. Unauthorized movement detected. All units, search for the human. Great, Reeve muttered. They noticed. His heart pounded as he reached a vent cover. He peered through it. Below, Syndicate guards rushed through the halls, armed and alert. He had to time this perfectly. Waiting for the right moment, he counted. 3, 2, 1. He kicked the vent open and dropped down. The guards turned, startled. Reeve was faster. He grabbed a metal tray from a nearby table and threw it at the nearest guard's face. The guard stumbled back as Reeve lunged forward, grabbing his weapon. A quick strike to the back of the second guard's head, and he went down. The first guard recovered, raising his weapon, but Reeve didn't give him a chance. He slammed his elbow into the guard's gut, then knocked him out with a final punch. He exhaled. Still got it. No time to waste. He sprinted down the hallway toward Dock 12. A dangerous path. The station's corridors were twisting and complex, like a maze. The Syndicate had built this place for war, not comfort. Reeve checked the stolen weapon. It had 2 shots left. Not great, but better than nothing. A squad of guards appeared ahead. Reeve ducked into a side passage, pressing against the wall. The guards were communicating through comms. No sign of him yet. Lock down all exits. Reeve clenched his jaw. If they sealed the docks, he was trapped. Then he spotted something. A maintenance cart loaded with spare parts sat nearby. An idea formed in his mind. He grabbed a plasma battery from the cart and hurled it toward the guards. As expected, they turned to look, right as Reeve fired his stolen weapon at the battery. Boom! The explosion sent the guards flying. Reeve sprinted past them before they could recover. Dock 12, Dock 12, he muttered, scanning the signs on the walls. Finally, he saw it. The mystery alley. Dock 12 was ahead. The doors were closing. The lockdown was almost complete. Reeve pushed himself harder, sliding under the doors just before they sealed. Inside, a sleek black ship waited, engines humming. And standing next to it, a familiar face, a Vaylari. Reeve skidded to a stop, stunned. You? The Vaylari woman, dressed in a dark pilot's suit, gave a small smile. Hello, human. Reeve had met her before, one of the Vaylari scouts from the battle. But why was she here? No time for explanations, she said. Get in. Reeve hesitated for half a second, but then the dock doors burst open, and Syndicate soldiers stormed in. No more thinking. He bolted up the ramp and into the ship. The Vaylari followed, sealing the hatch behind them. Hold on, she said. Reeve barely got into his seat before the ship launched forward at full speed. The chase. Syndicate fighters scrambled to intercept them. The Vaylari pilot's hands moved swiftly over the controls. They're fast, but we're faster. Reeve checked the sensors. 4 enemy ships were locking onto them. We need to shake them, he said. The Vaylari smirked. I was hoping you'd say that. She spun the ship into a tight barrel roll. Dodging laser fire, the enemy fighters closed in. Reeve saw the weapons console in front of him. Mind if I? The Vaylari gestured. Be my guest. Reeve grinned. He grabbed the controls and fired 2 missiles. The missiles locked onto the first fighter. Direct hit. 1 down. The remaining 3 spread out, trying to flank them. Reeve's instincts kicked in. Dive low. Make them chase. The Vaylari nodded and dropped the ship downward, skimming along the surface of the station. The enemy ships followed. Reeve saw an opening. Now, pull up. The ship shot upward at the last second. The Syndicate pilots weren't fast enough. 2 of them crashed into the station. The last fighter hesitated. Big mistake. Reeve locked onto it and fired. Boom. The sky was clear. Freedom and truth. The ship soared into deep space, leaving the Syndicate station behind. Only then did Reeve exhale. That was fun, he said, grinning. The Vaylari chuckled. You humans are reckless. Reeve leaned back. So, why'd you help me? She hesitated. Then she said, the Syndicate is dangerous. More than you know. They're gathering information on species across the galaxy, testing their combat abilities. They wanted to study you, not recruit you. Reeve's expression darkened. Yeah, I figured. She continued. But more than that, the Vaylari owe you a debt. You risked your life to save our ship. We do not forget such things. Reeve was silent for a moment. Then he smirked. Guess that means I'm your problem now. The Vaylari laughed. It seems so. She set the ship's course. Come. The fleet is waiting, and I think you'll want to hear what they have to say. Reeve looked out at the stars. He wasn't sure what came next, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning.